Welcome to Hastings' celebration of Black history, brought to you by Building Bridges in Hastings. My name is Bronwyn Scove, and I'm serving as your host today. And we begin with a narrative today offered by local folks, and we conclude with a comedy improv performance by our guests from Minneapolis, Blackout Comedy Improv Troupe. Where are my friends from Black Dirt Improv? They have these cool little slips of paper that they are going to send down the aisles right now. This is for you while you're listening to the first part of the performance. Think about what you might like to see Blackout make fun of or address during the second part of the program. We will let you know when it's time to turn these in. So these are coming down the aisles. Black Dirt, thanks for being in the house. So the first piece this afternoon is a Reader's Theater style narrative of the Black experience in Hastings' first 100 years, as recorded by federal census takers and the local newspapers. History is not always written by those who actually live it, but it is the record we have to reflect upon and from which we might learn. The Pioneer Room at City Hall, our local newspaper archives, and some anecdotes have provided source material for today's performance. The following presentation only scratches the surface of the many stories of people who settled in this area in the infancy of Minnesota statehood, spanning from the Civil War through both World Wars. It is our hope that this dramatic interpretation will cause curiosity and invite you to learn more. It is our intent to share information without judgment or offense, but some of the language is not current, as you will hear the terms colored and Negro in reference to Blacks as recorded in federal census statistics and when quoting newspaper reports. Many details have been left out in an attempt to cast a greater narrative, but we highly recommend reading the articles recently published in the Hastings Star-Gazette in honor of Black History Month, if you haven't done so already. I believe that Heidi Langenfeld, the author of those articles, is in the house today, so make sure you give her a thanks when we're finished. At this time, we invite you to please open your eyes, your ears, your minds, and your hearts as we share.
September 1857, Minnesota Territory Census in preparation for statehood. Hastings, 1,983 people. 1 listed as colored. Robert S. Burns, 32 years old, single. Occupation, barber. Previous residence, North Carolina.
According to the occupation listing on the census, Burns was the only Black man in Hastings and the only barber.
July and August, before the census, delegates from the Democratic and Republican parties gathered in St. Paul for the Constitutional Convention. Each party caucused separately and wrote their own version of a state constitution. Partisanship blocked progress, with Black suffrage being the barrier to compromise.
Passions reached such a pitch that delegates began doubting whether an agreement could be reached. An encounter between Democratic delegate Gorman and Republican delegate Wilson resulted in physical battery. Gorman, who had argued for compromise, broke his walking stick over Wilson's head during a confrontation in the committee room.
The Democrats had written a version of the Constitution that denied Blacks all rights of citizenship.
Many members of the Republican Party argued in favor of equality for the Black man, but the majority of the delegates chose to leave Black political rights for a later time.
The compromise reached in this highly charged dispute directly affected the local barber's future. 7 years later, Black suffrage would play an active role in an effort to change the 1857 Constitution. Joining Burns in this effort to influence the outcome was another Black barber named Andrew Jackson Overall, who arrived in Hastings from St. Paul shortly after the 1857 census. As Hastings grew, so too did the black population. Like many early settlers to the new state, merchants often lived in residences behind or above their business addresses. The growing overall family welcomed neighbors to their downtown neighborhood.
January 4th, 1864, the colored men of Hastings held a meeting to consider the feasibility of urging their claims to the rights of citizens, including black suffrage.
In 1865, both houses of the legislature passed a bill that proposed an amendment to strike white from the suffrage provision. 3 petitions from Hastings, Winona, and Rochester favored black suffrage. The amendment was voted down by the people, in spite of soon-to-be Governor William Marshall's strong support.
1867, black suffrage bill voted down again.
1868, black suffrage adopted by a majority of more than 9,000 votes.
The law provided for black voting and passed in Minnesota 2 years before the 15th Amendment passed nationwide.
1865, June, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 2,495 people, 14 colored. George Washington Daniels arrives in Hastings with General William Leduc's forces in August. President Andrew Johnson declares end of Civil War August 20th, 1866.
Did you know that Daniels was born a slave?
He escaped from the Confederate Army and met General Leduc.
He joined the Union Army.
Now he's a hired man at the Leduc estate up on Vermilion Street.
In October 1868, Cornelia Morgan from Prescott, Wisconsin, married George Washington Daniels. The couple moved into the carriage barn on the Leduc
The St.
property.
Clair family, Henry and Julia, moved to the Vermilion Street neighborhood with 3 children. St. Clair was known to be a teamster and a professional driver.
1870, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 3,458 people, 40 colored residents, living in 12 households, 4 barbers. Other occupations noted were teamster, hostelier, laborer, washerwoman, and fireman in sawmill.
Members of the growing black community in Hastings would join with their peers from across the state to continue to promote the rights. The Sons of Freedom, a statewide organization, was formed, and men shared their values and aspirations as they worked our political system to gain
Prestige,
recognition,
and
equity. September 9th, 1875. The celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation by the colored people of this city on Friday evening of last week was a decided success.
The last biracial U.S. Congress of the 19th century passed the Civil Rights Act of 1875. It protected all Americans, regardless of race, in their access to public accommodations and facilities such as restaurants, theaters, trains, and other public transportation, and protected the right to serve on juries. However, it was not enforced, and the Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional in 1883. The fight for civil rights moved to the judicial realm. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that designating separate railway cars for whites and blacks was constitutional, as long as the facilities were
Equal.
The
Separate
but
Equal.
doctrine stood until 1954, when the Supreme Court ordered school desegregation in the case of Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. By some reports, the Civil Rights Act was celebrated by local blacks and whites together in the local Germania Hall. Newspaper reports from neighboring towns did not characterize the celebration in a very kind manner.
1880, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 3,809 people, 24 colored. There were no barbers.
April 27th, 1881. Obituary. One of Hastings' old settlers, A.J. Overall, has passed to the other side. He died on Tuesday after a long sickness. He was one of the first colored citizens of Hastings, having come to this city in 1857. Jack was one of the boys in his day, but some years ago experienced religion and since then lived according to his lights. He had many friends in this city, and all regret his demise.
Jack was a unique person who stood up for his beliefs. Born a free man, he worked to achieve full citizenship for himself and others. He was a true civil rights activist. He was buried in Lakeside Cemetery.
The Daniels family left Hastings and moved to Medford over in Steele County to establish a farm.
Not all census records are clear. The movements of settlers at the turn of the century was rapid and sometimes difficult to track as people married and moved. In the mid-1880s, two black families who would be influential moved to Hastings, the Currys and Wallaces.
Nancy and John Wallace began living alone on 4th Street. Their son James was living in a boarding house downtown and worked as a yard man.
The Wallace house was full when Nancy's niece Ella and her husband James Curry, with their 2 daughters, moved to Hastings from Virginia.
Currys stayed at Wallace's only long enough to get established. Jim Curry's first job was working for Charles Mather, the postmaster, helping him around his home on 8th Street. He took any kind of work, from farm laborer to carpenter to slinging hash in the Ryan Hotel
His first
in St.
investment in
Paul.
Hastings was to buy a lot where he helped to build a house, which he later sold.
In 1889, Curry purchased 2 lots and built a fine 9-room home on 4th Street. Then he purchased 8 adjoining lots and became a real farmer,
Purchasing a cow,
building a barn.
bought some chickens,
He even was given a horse
and had a large garden. In the summer of 1894, he was offered a good job at a summer resort over by Prior Lake. It was owned and managed by William Hull from Hastings. He was the handyman there for 19 seasons. He loved swimming since he was a young lad, so one of his tasks at the resort was teaching young and old to
James
swim.
and Ella Wallace moved in next door to his parents on 4th Street and eventually had 7 children.
1890, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 3,705 people, 34 colored. This census also allowed for immigration designations from many European countries.
Because many people of Swedish descent settled at the top of West 4th Street, it became known as Swede Hill by the locals. Scattered among the Swedes were a few families of German and Irish parentage, and the growing Wallace and Curry families. They all were neighbors. Their school-aged children attended Tilden School, and many of the men worked together at the sawmill and other jobs,
Regardless of their race or nationality. Our churches tended to be shaped by nationality and religious preference. There were the Swedish and German Lutheran churches, the German and Irish Catholic churches, and a German Baptist church.
St. Luke's Episcopal, First Presbyterian, First Baptist, and the Methodist churches tended to attract citizens from out east.
The Methodist Church was the choice of the colored citizens of Hastings until October 1891. A meeting was held at Wallace's house to talk about starting a church of their own. Reverend J.C. Anderson, an American Methodist Episcopal pastor from St. Paul, had been commissioned to organize a church in Hastings. They elected officers that night, including the male Wallaces and James Curry. A new congregation was formed.
An opportunity arose in 1891 for the congregation to purchase a small frame church from the German Baptists located on the corner of 5th and Sibley Streets. The members pledged what they could afford and then began to raise the $500 purchase price.
December 26, 1891. Letter to the editor by J.C. Anderson regarding the newly formed African Methodist Episcopal Church. He explained that they had been meeting as a congregation in a private home and then rented rooms on the upper floor of the Hanson's block for over a year. And I quote,
Experience has taught us the necessity of having a place of our own, where we may become permanently situated and worship God according to the dictates of our own consciences, without shame or fear.
He ended the letter with a request for financial support from the community to accomplish their goal of raising $200 for a down payment.
July 16th, 1892, the colored people of Hastings and vicinity are making great preparations for the opening of Brown's Chapel on the corner of 5th and Sibley on Sunday. The people of Hastings, of whatever religious opinion, are requested and cordially invited to attend.
Finally, the big day arrived. Brown's Chapel opened Sunday, October 17, 1892. They held 3 services that day. The first one was at 10:30 a.m.
Reverend J.C. Anderson preached, and a choir of colored singers from St. Paul and Minneapolis provided music.
Pastors from 3 Hastings churches celebrated with them for the 3 p.m. service. The pastor of the First Baptist Church offered prayer.
The Methodist pastor preached on, "There is no salvation without suffering."
And the Presbyterian pastor spoke of the general good of an institution like this in a community.
The Methodist choir conducted the singing.
Reverend J.R. James of Minneapolis preached at the 7:45 p.m. service.
And the colored choir sang again.
It was a full and memorable day for all who had helped to make this dream a reality. The Black residents now had a gathering place of their own to worship according to their traditions. For years, Brown's Chapel was the center of religious and social activity for Blacks in the area, with many weddings and funerals taking place. The local newspapers hold reports of visits from former Black citizens demonstrating connectivity to Hastings and the Black residents who stayed on.
November 22nd, 1896, card of thanks. The AME Church of this city wished to extend to the generous people of Minnesota and Wisconsin thanks for the assistance they have rendered in contributing to the fund raised by Samuel Golden, solicitor of Prescott, Wisconsin, for payment on the debt of our church, which we are unable to raise ourselves. The sum raised this year is $49.81 net. Signed by the trustees, James Curry, James Wallace, John Wallace, and Cornelius Peterson, pastor.
April 10th, 1897. John Wallace will give a history of his life with a few plantation songs at Matches Hall next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. The net proceeds going to Brown's Chapel. Admission, 25 cents.
March 6, 1900, obituary. Mr. John Wallace died in his home on West 4th Street yesterday, 8:30 a.m., after a protracted illness, aged about 70 years. He leaves a wife and 1 son, James Wallace. The deceased was one of our most widely known colored citizens and had formerly been a slave. He was brought here from Kentucky by Company F, 3rd Minnesota Regiment in 1862, and has ever since been a resident. He was a good citizen, and by his genial manner made many friends. His familiar figure upon our streets will be greatly missed. He was a prominent member of the AME Church. The funeral will be held tomorrow.
1900, state of Minnesota, city of Hastings, 3,811 people, 35 colored.
This census was taken in June, 3 months after John's death. The 4 residences of the Curry, Douglas, and Wallace families accounted for 21 of the 35 Black people counted on that census. All of them were members of the AME Church and would have been at John Wallace's funeral. There can be little doubt that John's presence in that close-knit neighborhood was greatly missed.
Fall, 1907.
Fire! There's a
The
fire!
church is burning down!
There's a fire!
Brown's Chapel is burning!
Fire!
The ringing of the fire bell on Friday evening called out the fire department when it was ascertained that the AME Church was on fire, and through their efforts, the fire was promptly extinguished.
Upon investigation, it was found that an entrance had been effected by someone through a back window by cutting the screen and raising the sash.
There were indications where kerosene had been poured over the floor, pews, and elsewhere in the building, so that there is no doubt that it was the work of an incendiary.
Brown's Chapel, the African Methodist Church's floor, was ruined, most of the pews badly charred, the walls and ceiling blackened, and the windows broken. The fire department turned out, and by their prompt efforts, the building was saved. There was no insurance.
Both papers agreed the fire was the work of incendiaries, but reported different days that it occurred. No newspaper articles have been found that report an investigation into who started the fire. 2 years following the fire, it was reported that Brown's Chapel had been sold to Michael Grouse for $300. The early 1900s were a time of growth and investment in education, including the addition of a football team. Photos and accounts of sporting events show that some of the Wallace and Curry children participated in sports, as well as other school activities.
9 of the 10 Curry children graduated from Central High School in Hastings. Howard was one of only 4 males on the 1905 class of 29 graduates, and Florence was valedictorian of her class in 1906. Some went on to higher education in other communities and states and served in professional roles in their chosen fields.
1910, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 3,983 people, 27 colored.
At least 3 Curry family marriages took place in their home on 4th Street after the fire. By 1920, William was the only child living with James and Ella in Hastings. The rest of their children were living and working in Minneapolis. Many of the young men joined the service and served overseas during the First World War.
1920, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 4,670 people, 10 colored. The Wallace family was missing from the 1920 Hastings census for the first time in 50 years.
August 22nd, 1925. Rumors that Ku Klux Klan delegations in large numbers were scheduled to parade through the streets of Hastings Saturday evening proved authentic when a white-robed procession of more than 200 Klansmen formed on the outskirts of the city and marched through the business district, preceded by 2 of their members on horseback.
Informed in some manner of the scheduled ceremony, hundreds of people lined the main business thoroughfare and witnessed the parade.
The Klan meeting, which followed the parade, was held at the vacant ground east of Highway No. 3, near the King Midas Mill. Mounted members of the secret order patrolled the outer edge of the field and prevented the immense audience that had assembled in the vicinity from gathering too closely about the circle of white-clad figures in the center of which a huge cross had been erected.
Before the meeting, Mayor Sieben and a special policeman were escorted from the grounds by Klansmen, following a brief controversy over the burning of the cross. The mayor informed the Klan spokesman that the fire department, which had been summoned to the scene, was under orders to extinguish the burning emblem and that orders would be complied with.
The Klansmen didn't try to burn the cross in town, and the Methodist pastor, William E. Thompson, who was one of their speakers, said he would try and prevent anyone from burning anything within the city limits. Clearly, he wasn't happy about the mayor setting limitations on their gathering. He closed the meeting with the Lord's Prayer.
Kingdom come,
Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
But they still held their blazing cross ceremonial at the Cook Farm south of town, and by 1926, when the Klan gathered again out in Nininger, Pastor Thompson was no longer at the Hastings Methodist Church, but he was still preaching to the Klan.
The lack of information about Klan activities, other than the reports of the big rallies and Mayor Sieben's opposition to the cross burning, calls into question the community's reaction. The lack of investigation over the burning of Brown's Chapel and the presence of the KKK surely must have weighed heavily upon Hastings' Black residents.
1930, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 5,086 people, 3 colored.
November 24th, 1933, James Curry died. He had been working as the public school janitor for 15 years and was admired by many. His death caused great sadness. All the Hastings newspapers carried articles about his life and his death.
The downtown businesses closed for his funeral, and the Methodist Church was packed. Larry Ho, who grew up in Hastings, served 2 terms as mayor of St. Paul. He was a writer for the St. Paul Dispatch and paid tribute to Curry, In his column, he said,
"One of the best friends of my childhood days, James Curry of Hastings, is dead. This splendid colored man, who was raised in the atmosphere of slavery, sang his gallant way through life. I am proud that so splendid a man loved me truly. I salute his memory, and in reverence I tell this one incident of his glad and smiling life. One night, he sang a song at the Hastings Opera House at a church benefit. In the midst of his song, the electric lights went out. Jim laughed and called out, 'Cheer up, folks, we are all the same color now.' No, Jim, old pal, unfortunately, we are not all the same color, though we should be. You were radiant gold all through, while most of us are a drab yellow. I'd like to throw a rose to you, Jim, but across the distance, all I can throw is my heart. No less loving in this hour of our parting than on that first day 50 years ago when you first held me on your lap."
(1940) State of Minnesota, City of Hastings. 5,662 people, 1 colored.
Ella Curry continued living in Hastings for a year before moving to Minneapolis after James's death. She lived with her youngest daughter, Merlin, until she died on October 8, 1943. James and Ella are both buried in Lakeside Cemetery.
1950, State of Minnesota, City of Hastings, 6,560 people, 1 colored.
January 22nd, 1954, obituary. Henry Thomas, 74, friend of many, died here Monday.
This city's only Negro resident died of a heart attack here at 1:20 p.m. Monday. Funeral services for Mr. Thomas, who has made his home here for some 23 years, will be held at Guardian Angels Church at 9 o'clock this morning, Friday, with the Reverend Ferguson officiating. Interment will be in the Guardian Angels Cemetery.
97 years span the period of time between Robert Burns and Henry Thomas in Hastings. During that time, blacks had fought for their freedom and then their rights as citizens, had celebrated the victory of obtaining those rights, and together joined in learning more about becoming good citizens. They dreamt of and organized their own church to worship God according to their consciences without shame or fear, only to have it destroyed by arsons. They watched their children attend and excel in scholarship and sport. Many worked, died, and were buried in Hastings, but their children chose to pursue their own dreams, where there were more opportunities for themselves and their children.
We know that wasn't the most entertaining thing, but we hope that it was interesting and that you learned some things about the founding fathers and mothers of Hastings that perhaps you didn't know before today. This afternoon, the next part of our program is an invitation to recognize this history and the history that informs many of us, as well as to look to a brighter and different future. Hastings Building Bridges has been working with the faith community in addition to many interested citizens. And right now I invite 2 priests of the community from St. Luke's Episcopal Church, the Reverend Mary Rowan and the Reverend Beth Wanamaker, to please come forward to call us together into a pledge and prayer.
How do we learn from our past, become more aware of our present, and plan to do better in our future? We invite you to join us in recognizing that all humans have value. deserve full access to basic needs, deserve safety, education, and opportunity to succeed, deserve peace, justice, and equality.
We invite you to join us in recognizing that history shows us behaviors that fall short of valuing all humans. We and our relatives before us have failed to respect the dignity of others. We and our relatives before us have indulged in fear and selfishness. We and our relatives before us have lacked courage in welcoming strangers.
How do we become better neighbors?
We invite you to join us as we dare to reconcile the struggles of our past with hope for a brighter future by pledging to focus on and work for the common good of our community, dedicate ourselves to creating justice, put the needs of the oppressed before self-centered wants and desires.
We invite you to join us as we dare to reconcile the struggles of our present, as we strengthen our community to create institutions that welcome and not bar Black, brown, yellow, and red people who with us reflect the rich diversity of humanity.
We invite you to join us as we make our pledge to God, asking forgiveness for failing to support one another, failing to be what we claim to be, asking forgiveness for failing to support one another as trusting and helpful neighbors.
We shall strive to be one people, encouraging one another for our own success and the collective success of our community of Hastings, regardless of the many differences we may notice, but uniting as neighbors who share a common goal as diverse humans, deserving equity and inclusion for all. Amen.
I believe that history is alive and with us always. I believe that even small historical acts are like pebbles dropped into a quiet pool, and that those little splashes ripple and amplify over time to shape behaviors, attitudes, beliefs, systems, and law. I believe that someday in the future, this gathering might be viewed as history-making, if together we resolve to learn from our elders and build a more welcoming and inclusive Hastings community. I'm ready to make some history. How about you? Building Bridges in Hastings is a newly formed coalition of churches, organizations, and individuals dedicated to hospitality, equity, and inclusion. We are joined in the belief that healing and reconciliation occur whenever people gather with open hearts and open minds to speak and to listen. We invite you to join us for future events and meetings. You were given a 3x5 card when you came in. Please give us your name and email address so that we can stay in touch with you. I promise that I will not fill your mailbox with spam. Please also like and follow us on Facebook. After this event, I invite you to join the cast of Blackout and the Reader's Theater for cookies and conversation. Your free will donation is welcomed and appreciated. Also, please thank and support the individuals and organizations who have supported this project. Their names are printed on the back of the program. Finally, I need to give a shout out to my bosses, the Board of Trustees of Lakeside Cemetery, who've permitted me to take some time away from my duties to work on this project. I promise I'm back at work next week, folks. And now, on with the show. I hope you enjoy Blackout Improv.
Yeah! Mic check. 1, 2.
Hello.
Hey.
Wyatt.
I'll just say my name. John Gravitatios.
Melissa DiVirgilio.
Theo Landison.
Ashanti Ford.
Duck like the bird, Washington.
Yeah. That's not a joke. That's a real thing. Great, wonderful. Everybody's here, and today we're just going to fix racism. Great. Yeah. A little bit about us. We are Blackout, and what we do is amazing. Improv, but we're black. Yeah. That's right. That's right. And this is the right context for it, but I just got to say it. If you're white and you're fragile, get ready for a long night. Yes, that's right. Good laugh, you get a What we've been able to do over the last couple of years is just be ourselves, and then also, as a result, we've been doing social justice work. So we're comedians, we're funny, we're actors, we're talented, but we hopped on stage and it became political. And this is just kind of our gift, and we're so humble and we're so honored that you would have us, and thank you very much for bringing us out here and taking a risk. And we congratulate the work you're doing. White people, black people, you're doing great. Keep it going. But without further ado, let us get into some games. I need a brave person, because a white brave person. Brave, I mean, we came out here to Hastings as black people. Let's take a step forward with the bravery.
Oh, Raiders.
Where are we at here? You want to do it? Oh, wait. Yeah, you? Are you a performer?
Yeah, sure.
All right, come on up, Spy. Give him a round of applause, yeah? Wonderful. Grab this, yeah. Test. Wonderful. Give it up for our audio engineer tonight. What's her name? Kara. Give it up for Kara, everybody. Kara. What's your name? Marty. What's your last name?
Weber.
Marty Weber. And can you honestly say, look me in the eyes, and admit whether or not you are white?
I am white.
Okay, we have a white person here. What you're going to see is not a magic trick. What we're going to do as black performers is recreate Marty's life the way he knows it. Now, Marty, this is called the day in the life of a white person.
All right.
So, I need you to tell us, let's pick a day this week. Let's go yesterday, not today. Yesterday.
Yeah.
Just kind of run through yesterday in your mind. Good?
Yeah.
Good. All right, you woke up, and what did you do?
I showered and brushed my teeth and stuff.
Okay, all right. Showered and brushed his teeth and stuff. Wonderful. Yes. All right. And then after that?
I went to work at a daycare.
Oh, slow down. Was there any roommates or anybody in the household?
I live with my parents.
I knew it. All right. What are your parents' names?
Shelly and my stepdad, Greg.
Ooh, Shelly and Greg. Greg, did you go to high school with Greg? Wonderful. All right. We can just call them Pops if you want. So Shelly and Greg. Then you went off to work.
Yes.
As a babysitter.
Sure, yeah.
We've got a couple of answers coming. Okay. All right, as a babysitter. Yeah, okay. It's wonderful. And what happened?
I worked with the kids and they're crazy and stuff, but I love them.
Oh, that's beautiful. Why? You love working with kids?
Yeah, I love it.
Why?
I think there's a lot of innocence to them, and that just creates beautiful moments that I see all the time. And yeah, that's why I like
Checks
it.
out. I looked in his blue eyes. He's telling the truth, folks. All right, and then think of kind of like a special part of your day yesterday. After the beautiful babies, you know, think of like an event that stuck out. Give it a second. Good.
I did a stage reading. A
Of
show called Rumors by Neil Simon, and it was put on by the Theater Lab.
Okay, I want you to say that again like you're proud.
I did a stage reading with Lumen Theater Lab in Prescott last night.
All right, what was it?
Rumors by Neil Simon.
Got it, cool. Yeah, all right. And how did that go? Did anything happen? Was there any hiccups?
A couple for me.
Yeah. I'm just gonna keep doing this, and then
Okay.
tell me more. What did I do? I messed up a couple lines. You blocked it out of your memory. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yes.
You move forward. Wonderful. No, you messed up on some lines.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're doing reading. That's very common. So throughout your day, it sounds like you woke up, you showered, you brushed your teeth, maybe you had breakfast, we don't know. Then went off to work with babies, right? And then you had a stage reading, right? And what was the name of the parents?
Shelly and Greg.
Shelly and Greg. And the babies' names go.
There's Penelope, there's Charlotte, there's Alice, there's Benny, there's Jace, there's Xander, there's
Better name them all. That's good. We'll come back for more if we need more. So that's a day in the life. Do we got any other questions or anything?
What's the name of the daycare you work at?
Yeah, what's your name?
my name is Marty. The name of the daycare is Hard Hands and Mind Inc.
Heart, Hands, and Mind Inc.
Ink.
Oh, Mind Inc?
Mind ink?
Mind Inc. as in incorporated.
Okay.
Oh.
Not as an ache.
From the mind.
Mind
My mind's ink. Yes, I need more Mind Inc. Okay. All right, Mind's Inc. Marty. Do we have any questions for Marty?
What was your favorite line that you read last night in the play?
Somebody shut that damn thing off.
All right. I wish the tech was here. We'd black it out right there.
Sorry.
That was great. Any other questions for Marty? Marty? Y'all got any questions for Marty? No? We trust and we believe? All right, give it up for Marty, everybody. Yeah! Please have a seat. Actually, I want you to have a seat right here on these chairs. Because what you're about to see is your life. Based on the little information you gave us, what you will see of live performance, we create your life.
Shelly! 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 Wake up, you don't need your beauty sleep anymore. Get that bird out of here. Honey, I made you some pancakes and eggs and sausage links and orange juice that I squeezed freshly off of our orange tree backyard. So we have
Blooming in February, my favorite. You are so good to me, baby. I love you. I love you.
Oh, gross. Could you guys get a room?
Marty! Congratulations, you got up! Only white women get the birds to help them.
All right, that's fine. Okay. Well,
My son, step.
Yes. Gregory.
I made you just pancakes, not eggs, not sausage links.
Wow. Greg, you know pancakes are my least favorite part of breakfast.
I know.
Here, I'll cut the little squares in them. Now you've got waffles. There we go.
It's not the same, Mom. It's not the same.
Orange juice?
It's not the same. It's just like how Greg isn't actually my dad.
Okay.
20 years, right?
20 years too long. You know what? Look, I've already showered and brushed my teeth and stuff. I'm gonna take my butt to work.
Hey, way to go. Hey, I'm Greg's high school friend, Jim.
Jim, I love when you stop by.
All right.
Hi, Jim.
Hey.
I have no preconceived notions about you.
Lovely.
Welcome to our home. Help yourself to anything.
Thank you. I've been here. I've been in the attic. Thanks.
We hang out all the time.
Greg, how many copies of the Kowski are you gonna hand out, okay? Look,
Well, there's one for Jim, there's one for George, there's one for Jamal, there's one for Anton and Penelope.
And Xanadu.
Xanadu just learned how to walk.
All right, you know what? I'm gonna go to work. You guys have fun doing your whatever you do.
So proud of him.
Oh, it's Mr. Marty. Hi.
Hey guys. Hey. Good to see you all here at Hearts, Hands, and Feet and Toes and Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes Inc. Here we go.
Yeah.
Marty, you're 15 minutes late.
I can explain. Okay.
Don't tell me your stepdad was talking your ear off again. I don't want to hear that as an excuse.
Okay, but it's true. Actually, at this point, it's almost like a pre-existing condition, and frankly, I should be allowed to come late to work because.
Marty, I'm gonna write you up.
I'm sorry. Okay. Look, Tammy. You know that I'm having a hard time. You know, I had to move back in with my parents after college. It's just like life is really hard right now. Being
Marty, I don't want to hear it. You millennials are always talking as if life is hard. Do you know what I had to go through in my day? Do you know what 1964 looked like? Wow. I'm a baby and I know my life is going to be hard because it's 1964 and we're smart.
All right.
I'm just picking myself up by my bootstraps. I'm 4 months old.
Oh, come back to Marty's work.
Wow, that was very informational. Yeah, you were a baby in 1964, so you don't know what it was like either.
I had eyes back then like
Okay.
I do now. Take your slip, deal with it.
Fine, I'll deal with it, Tammy.
Bye, Tammy. Ooh, Mr. Marty got in trouble.
Shut up, Penelope.
Whoa.
Look, you might be 4, but that doesn't mean I won't tell you off.
Whoa. I just learned to speak now to defend myself. Please.
It's time you learn, children, that adults don't care about you.
There's no trash over there. They do care.
Newsflash, this whole country is trash. Welcome to it.
Mr. Marty.
What?
Mr. Marty. You seem so angry.
I'm angry!
Mr. Marty, I'm
Marty,
sorry
that's
I'm
okay.
late. My name's Christina. I want to know more. Tell me more about life.
Wow, Christina. We can sit?
Well, okay. I don't mean to like harsh your childhood buzz or whatnot, but.
Oh no, I got no balance.
All right, so when you become an adult, right, they're gonna say, go to college, do that thing, learn some books. And you're gonna go, and you're gonna realize that the books cost like a mortgage. You're just like, and newsflash, you have to buy the books, but guess what? You don't ever use them. They just sit there and they collect dust. You know what? That's right. And then you get out of college, and then you find out that no one wants your degree because someone talked you into being a theater major.
Oh.
Mr. Marty!
That sounds like the scariest thing ever.
It is! It is! I'm really good at emoting!
I couldn't help but overhear from my office where I listened to you because nothing. Anyway, I just think that
Lost my balance.
things are really, they're hard, but that's why you have a mom who applauds everything that you do for encouragement, and not everybody has that.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, Mom. Thank you for following me to work and listening to everything I'm saying to these children.
I'm just here to support you, bub.
No, I get it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm having a bad day. I didn't really eat breakfast, you know, because I don't like pancakes or waffles.
But I cut
Yeah, Penelope, what do you want?
Yeah, if they give teachers guns, I don't want them to give one to you.
Okay. All right. You know what? Class is over.
Welcome to a table reading of Othello.
Hey guys, I'm sorry I'm late. I've just been having a really rough day, but.
Shh, we're in the middle of a scene.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Thou art thou.
Pivot.
Hiveth. Toeth cometh, goeth, groweth.
Nay.
I'm sorry. I think someone gave me the wrong script.
Yeah. Top of the page.
Of all the gin joints in all of the.
Marty, you gotta focus.
Okay.
There are people here watching
Okay.
us now. Out, damn spot! Out, I say!
Yeah. For he is a fool who cannot shippeth.
Cause I got friends in low places.
Marty, you really gotta get it together.
We're at scene 7, act 2, 3rd stanza, 5th word.
Okay.
I am so in love with someone who doesn't appreciate me. I will drown myself.
Greatest is this, the timest of us cometh fortheth.
Oh, I just realized I was in Hamlet. Sorry.
Marty, stop inviting your friends.
Okay. Stay golden, pony boy. I'm sorry.
Cut! What is going on here? We're doing Hamlet, people.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I think we all brought the wrong script.
You're doing Lady Macbeth. I don't know what it is that you're doing.
I'm sorry. I'm just having a rough day, guys. I'm just having a hard day.
Marty. We all fumble lines every once in a while.
Tell us how you really feel.
You know, sometimes I just feel this deep sadness in my heart, and I look in the mirror and I say, won't someone just shut this damn thing off?
Give it up for Blackout! What? Come on! All right, now give a hand for Marty. Thank you, Marty.
Yes, go ahead, grab a seat. And next we have a segment called Swag Hat. I do need, we have a hat that we had people collect suggestions. All right. We haven't collected them? Okay, so we have ushers coming down, and in the meantime, while they're collecting suggestions, I'm going to
just play the offering music while we pass the hat.
We'll reach into your pockets and deep into your hearts and fit as you would to please this demonstrate your ideas and thoughts to the Blackout congregation today.
Harmonize.
Can I get an amen?
Can I get an amen?
Amen!
Can I get a sexy amen?
Amen!
Yeah.
John
What's
said sexy.
What's that? You're like, ha! Yes, keep on giving. Reach deep into that suggestion pocket. Yes. Deacon, just.
All right.
We're ready.
We'll start with this. We've got to fix racism. Come on, y'all. No, wonderful. So we have suggestions here. Can you hear me quick? We have suggestions here that y'all kind of wrote in here. What we're going to do is a format called Swag Hat, where we just pull one randomly and we talk about the discussion as black people. Oh, louder. Okay. Louder? I got one volume. Hello? Good? Okay. So what we'll have is somebody randomly pull from this hat. We'll read it out loud what that suggestion is, or I'll say it, or whatever we're gonna do. We'll communicate it and talk about it as black performers, discuss it, and then we'll get up and do scenes based off of what we just talked about. So that's gonna happen, no surprises. Who would like to pull from the hat? Would you like to pull from the hat? Sure. Everybody get up and running, yeah! All right, business.
Influenza dealing with daycare parents.
Influenza dealing with daycare parents.
Marty?
want to take that one? Y'all want to take it?
We can.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, we can, because I think about, well, scratching the daycare parents part, just influenza. I think about, there's people who like believe in the flu shot. There's people who don't believe in the flu shot. There's people who say like, oh, if you take vaccines, they're gonna give you all kinds of autism. Yeah, I guess I'm trying to formulate an opinion. That's what I thought about when I heard influenza.
My opinion is like people got an opinion on everything without facts.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, did you know the earth is flat today? And then we all kind of believe it though, a little bit. That they mean it.
Yeah. One of the things that I think's really kind of unfortunate about the way we treat work in our work life is you see a lot of people who feel like they're being strong when they go to work when they're sick. You know, and they're like, I'm gonna tough it out, and some of the times they do that because they have to go to work.
Yeah.
Or they feel like it takes away from their limited amount of sick time or vacation time to be away, or they just got bills to pay. But what happens is we create an epidemic when these flus come around, because people go to work or they go to public places sick. And then it spreads, and it spreads all over the place. And even though there is a flu shot, this year, my brother's a doctor, I think he said, like the report is that they think the flu shot is probably like 30% effective, but him being in an emergency room thinks it's really more like 18% effective. Because almost every other patient that he sees is somebody who's suffering from the flu.
Wow.
And I think we have a responsibility to each other to take care of each other when we're ill.
Me?
The people of this country.
Okay, all right.
I think, do you mean to say like we have a responsibility, like if someone says like, I'm actually feeling sick, I don't think I should go in, they should take care of themselves, and then their place of employment should not be like shaming them for not coming in and pulling through that kind of stuff.
All
I
of
totally
Well,
agree.
because like if you're, I feel very loud, so I'm going to talk softly. If you feel like you can't like touch people, like there are people who like go in public spaces and they're like, oh, I shouldn't shake your hand, I'm sick. Like, well, you should be at home.
Yeah.
Like if you don't feel comfortable shaking someone's hand, go home.
You can't shake my hand, go home.
And then the worst thing about it is that like some of the people who are most vulnerable to getting sick and like not being able to go into work are like food service workers, because they don't have sick time a lot of the time, and which doesn't make sense, because the last thing you want is some person that has to go into their job at McDonald's, like coughing on your Big Mac, because they can't, because they need to pay bills and they don't have any paid time off. Them having paid time off is beneficial for everyone. Because I don't want to bite into my Big Mac and have there be like a big snot.
Secret sauce.
Oh man, you make me want to vote right now. That bugs me that we can't just fix it. I hate that we have people with a lot of money who have paid like for doctors to take care of whatever they had to, and that's great. But I can't believe we don't have the money to fix the flu. We should have already had that taken care of. And you're right, like the food workers, the people who are lower class, have to suffer, and they can't not miss work. One time I could not go to work, and then I got fired because I could not go to work because I was sick.
Wow.
And I was just like, I gotta put my foot down. Otherwise, this rat race will just collapse, and I will suffer. Sometimes you gotta get off the race and just see you later.
Well, and it's dangerous too. I mean, the flu can be really, people die from the flu all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just about I have a cold. Right. Like people get seriously ill.
You know about this because your brother's a doctor.
I know about this even though my brother's a doctor.
So I want to ask, how does it feel
I'm educated.
Your brother's a doctor. Does that get brought up in the house?
It doesn't necessarily get brought up, but there's a different class level in my family where they're like, oh yes, we're going to Hawaii for Thanksgiving this year. And I'm like, I'm not going to Hawaii for Thanksgiving this year. I'll be on stage somewhere trying to make 5 cents.
I didn't even know that, but I just thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's fun. It's like he lives in a whole different world. It's always amazing to me when I go out there.
Is your blood brother?
He is my blood brother.
Damn.
Yeah.
Because what's the other kind of brother?
Adopted.
In-law.
I know. No, I just wanted you to say it.
In-law. Oh, okay. Adopted for 500.
I have.
In-law.
Cool. We good?
Are we good?
Yep.
Beep, boop, boop, bop, beep, beep, boop, bop, boop, boop.
Hello.
Hi, is this my place of employment?
Hello. Yes, it is.
Hi.
This is Wendy's.
Huh?
Wendy's.
Yes, hi, Sharon.
Hey, Sharon.
Hi, I'm just calling to let you know I can't come in to work today. I'm calling in black.
2 p.m. Excuse me, what?
I said I'm calling in black.
Well, okay. Sharon, I think the phone's breaking up. Your landline.
No, you heard me correctly.
I heard. Calling in back.
I'm calling in black. African American.
Okay,
I'm calling in.
Hold on, Sharon. Hello, Wendy's.
Hi, is this Sharon?
No, Sharon is not around at the moment. Can I ask who's calling?
This is Becky.
Oh, Becky with the good hair.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's good to hear from you, Becky.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I just needed to talk to my supervisor because I need to call in white today.
Well, why didn't you say so?
I thought so. Thank you for understanding.
Yeah, of course.
Bye. I'm gonna go to Hawaii and do yoga and meditate and drink apple cider vinegar and plant an avocado tree and
Oh, that's great. Mahalo.
Yeah, mahalo. Aloha.
Hello.
Sharon. Sorry, I just had to take care of an emergency.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened. Yeah, I just, there's a lot of just stuff happening and going on in the news. And I just personally, my own self-care, I cannot take it. And I can't be out in the world when in the inside I'm actually hurting and you expect me to be smiling in
I don't know
people's
what
faces.
self-care means. I understand that things are happening in the news, but Sharon, you can't just take a African-American day off.
What? The hell I can? What you mean? I have to take care of myself. I can't. Don't put me on hold. Don't put me on hold. Don't put.
I'll put you on three-way. Hello, Wendy's.
Yes. Hi, this is Fraser.
Fraser.
How are things going at Wendy's today?
Oh, splendid, perfect, marvelous.
I just wanted to announce to you that I will be calling in white today. Yeah. We have a reservation at the lake house.
Oh.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, what will we do to? Hey, sure. We lost another one.
Okay, so.
We lost him to
You lost what?
a Minnesota cabin.
You lost the cabin.
We lost another employee to another cabin.
Okay, so. Can I get the day off or?
Oh, right, the African American. Whoa, hey, let's just say you.
Oh, sure. Do not put me on hold. Do not put me on hold. Do not put me on hold again. I swear, if you put me on hold again.
Hello, Wendy's, everybody.
Hi, it's Daphne. I gotta go.
This three-way call.
Oh my gosh, hi. This was Niles? Niles, you on the other line there?
It's me, yes.
Yeah. We've got to go to the we can't work.
Oh, Daphne, from England, we just hired you.
Yeah, I've got to go. I've got another job.
Okay.
Incredible. And it's just more supportive of my Englishness.
Gotcha, definitely. I understand that. Did someone else have anything to say?
I'm gonna go swimming. It's gonna be great.
Great, wonderful. All right, toodaloo.
Toodles.
Shannon, I cannot explain this better, but the English employee called and made me feel dumb. So yeah.
Okay, so to my original question.
Yes.
Can I have the day off?
Yes.
Hi, can I have number 5 with the side of fries?
You taste very soulful. Shannon, you can't have you spitting in the food. Shannon, I cannot have you spitting in the food. Shannon, what are you doing?
Do not have a breakdown right now.
Who?
You do not have the breakdown right now. I already told you I didn't want to come in, and you're forcing me to come in here and work when I said I could not. I'm going through a lot right now.
I
Okay?
just had 2 breakdowns in my brain, Shannon. I need you.
I'm feeling a little verklempt. I think it was some food that I ate here yesterday. Can you please,
Sir,
give me a refund?
It was me.
It was you?
Yes, it was me, and I'm a white man who's spitting your food.
Well-
Blame me. Do not blame Shannon.
As long as it was you.
What?
Haven't I?
Get out of here. So that's how
A button.
Good catch, John.
What is the proper way to reference a person of mixed black
white race? What is the best way to call somebody name?
By their name. No.
Okay.
Extra no. Okay, so
That's like half
we can talk about. Oh, there's more. There's more on there. Oh, you're actually reading from the thing. Okay, sorry.
Or what?
What is wrong? Great. So I can like off, but there are 3 of us up here who are mixed.
Yeah.
Like most people, we all have our own perspectives, our own points of view.
Shit.
So I can only speak for myself. But I think first and foremost, there is no situation in which you knowing what a person, like what race they are, or like where they, like what their background is, like that actually has no bearing on the way that you interact with them, right? Like other than your own prejudices, which we all have, right, that are like built in, that we're conditioned to believe and to think without intending to think those things. I cannot think of a single situation in which it is absolutely necessary that you know what they are, right? Because I'm a person. I love both of my parents. One of my parents is white, one of them is black. My dad is actually from Africa, so that adds a whole nother layer of complexity to the thing in my relationship towards being black in America. But like I consider even though like I am mixed race, but I'm black, because there is not a world in which I am white. Like it just isn't. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist, you know. And I think that like half of my family is white, and so like that I have like that perspective, but I can't walk into any space claiming to be white, because I mean, like if I walked up here and said, "Hello, my name is Theo, I'm white," you would all laugh probably, because what?
Well, in a similar regard, the world just doesn't view us as being white. So it's like really kind of impossible for us to hold that as an identity. The world sees us as being, as a kid, I think so, yeah. You know, I grew up, most of the kids in my school were white kids in my school, and you wanted to blend in and you wanted to be like them, and, I don't think I ever would have claimed that I was white ever, but
want to assimilate.
But I wanted to assimilate. I didn't want to be different from everybody else, but I was always different from everybody else. And even in like when I was around black people, I still feel a little bit different, just because of my history and my experiences. Colorism is a thing, even within families. But I would still definitely lean on saying that I was black, or I was mixed, or I was multiracial, or I was biracial. The word mulatto was on that paper. I want to talk about that word for a minute because I've been in the Minneapolis paper a lot for that word over the last year. I wrote and produced a play in Minneapolis called Caucasian Aggressive Pandas and Other Mulatto Tales, which is all about my experiences being mixed. And it was going to be performed in the city of Burnsville. And the city of Burnsville freaked out, and they banned the play there because they were uncomfortable with the word mulatto. The word mulatto, I don't try to sugarcoat at all, is a word with hugely derogatory origins. It comes from the Spanish word mule, which is the cross between a horse and a donkey. And that origin obviously has really, really bad connotations to it.
It goes mulatto Republican.
Right. Well, don't ever call me a Republican. I think it's important to understand that some of these harsh words have history to them. You know, that used to be a census category on the census. We can't ignore that it was a thing, but we can address the fact that the history was wrong. You know, I think to quote whitewash, because I just can't think of a better term for it at the moment. History isn't educational.
Whitewash history is not educational.
You know, I think we need to address the fact that word has a history in our culture.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't walk down the street and go like, "Yo, my mulatto friend." I don't do that.
Nobody's
I highly recommend that you don't do that.
Have you heard mulatto friend?
Yeah, my well, not friend afterwards. My grandpa's wife, actually, is my step-grandmother, would use that term to reference myself and her biological grandson, who is also mixed. And for me, she'd say mulatta.
That's the white side.
Yeah.
Just
to clarify, yeah, that's the white side.
Mulatta is a black
Mufasa gave birth to Malala. Yeah, I don't know. Similar experience to Duck. I grew up with primarily my white side of the family and in predominantly white schools. It was a little, honestly, kind of traumatizing. Like, I had some PTSD come up, like, at the Hastings, like, Cub, and, like, coming here even. I was like, oh, God, this is very reminiscent of my upbringing and that feeling, like, singled out. And I will say that being, like, lighter-skinned, I never quite felt an aggressive, like I was a threat, but, like, I was, like, an exotic, like never been seen before, like specimen. So the like, can I touch your hair? It's like a kind of ignorant curiosity. So it's hard to like address and be like, back up, bitch, that's wrong, because there's something not malicious about it, but it does to be called mulatto or just to be asked like, what are you? Like, first of all, I'm a human person, and like, do you ask your like white friends like what, like where in like Europe are you from? Well,
Where are you from? Amsterdam, Dutch.
Oh, okay.
I just was telling you guys about this, but I had a realization. Because I teach high school students and they do social justice theater and they talk about their lives, and I have students who are mixed, whether it's black and white or Mexican and white or black or Mexican or whatever. I just had a realization yesterday and I was telling my students, I was like, wow, so mixed means you have parents that are two different colors. And it's, okay, for me, when my idea of mixed is like, okay, I see you, you have lighter skin, you have a little bit of curlier hair, you know what I mean? My idea of mixed was just surface. But my realization yesterday was that no, you had a whole upbringing with two different families, with two different sides, you know, with
two different
with
cultures.
two different
And,
cultures.
Two people. I was watching like a video where there's multiple mixed people talking about their experience.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's like black representation, and the mixed representation I would say is even less. As far as like speaking about what that experience is really like.
Yeah.
And there's a girl who's mixed and her mother is white, and she would talk about like this kind of dissonance that happens when she wants to have a conversation about like the racial tone in the country right now, and her mom defends whiteness, but she knows that her mom loves her and it's unconditional, but there's this like, well, she said, well, like, fuck whiteness, like, you're supposed to be defending me. And there's a kind of feeling like that, like, I know my family loves me and I know that it's genuine.
Yeah.
But to have like these ideas that feel like they go directly against who, like, my existence is like, how do you?
That's sad.
It's never made sense to me.
Pissing me off.
Yeah.
Racism runs that deep. You're conditioned enough to bypass your kid.
Yeah.
I guess that's why we're here. I feel good. I feel good.
Yeah.
Good. This Thanksgiving is going to be glorious.
Hello.
Yes, hello, welcome. Thanks for joining me and my family.
You're so welcome. I am like open to all experiences. I'm mixed with every possible ethnicity.
Great, I didn't need to say that, but that's cool.
Just so you know, so like you don't have to ask, because I know you're not supposed to.
Oh my God, honey, is this one of your friends? Hi, my name is Tiffany. I'm Tommy's mom. Thank you for coming. Okay, just before we begin, I just want to make sure I don't offend anyone. What are you? What?
You don't have to answer that.
I am a human being.
Well, okay, I know that, but like, no, Tommy, you don't understand. It's like, if I want to know what to offer her to eat, like, does she want green bean casserole? Or does she want lo mein? Or does she, I don't know. Just offer her food.
Yes, I know you can hear her.
I can hear. I can let you know, like, personally, I'm gluten intolerant.
Oh, is that somewhere in Africa?
What are you doing? Mother, kitchen now!
Okay, I'm excited to hear about
gluten intolerant. That's a country.
Gluten intolerant.
That's the Jersey.
Okay, Jumbo. You
They're so
Thank you. It's really hard to hear.
Meditate.
Actually, it's hard for me to hear you because you swear. I'm just trying.
Thanksgiving.
I'm not trying to give thanks to the diversity at our table.
What? That is a weird way to put it then.
I'm sorry.
You meditating? Sorry, she's meditating.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Can I just apologize, please?
Yeah, when she's done meditating.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'll get the door. Someone's at the door.
That's an interesting pose.
Hey, you
It was me. Forget that person across the street. It's just one of my fans. She follows me wherever I go. Hi, how's it going?
Hi, I'm Tiffany. Welcome. You one of Tommy's friends?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome to our house. Okay, so the bathroom is right down that hallway, first door on the left. If you want to go on your way there, you'll see there's some marking on the wall where we have height and also ethnicity. What? If you could just mark down your height and ethnicity right next to it's right kitchen. No, kitchen. I'll be right back. Please have a seat. Okay, all right. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh my God.
Hi.
Look, I need everyone to know that all are welcome here.
What? You just said you don't have to be the weird census bureau.
Because I need to know if I want to be inclusive. I need to make sure I know every single thing about every single person. By the way, you know your social security number. Don't worry, I've got it in my wallet.
What are you doing?
Our guests are lonely. So I'm gonna go and I'm going to go ask them some more questions.
Oh, just be
about
cool.
their deepest, darkest secrets.
I'll give you time up later. You go on with that later.
Okay, all right. So like 4 p.m. or
Keep it very Minnesota nice.
okay, all right.
Minnesota nice.
All right, okay. Okay.
Hey, welcome back.
You betcha.
This is a very interesting spread you have here.
Yes, it's everything. Everything you could ever want.
Tiffany Kitchen.
If you're
Kitchen, Tiffany.
Okay.
Tiffany Kitchen. Kitchen.
Gracias.
Sir, I found it. I found what the interracial family acts like.
What?
Yes, it took a long 50 years to follow them, but look at my spreadsheet. I started in the year 1952. Back then, the interracial family wasn't really accepted in the Americas. But if we go all the way down to 90...
Wife, we must run.
Okay.
It's 1950.
Oh
We gotta run.
Can't wear high heels. Yay.
And if we come down, sir, to 1992, you will find that a lot of interracial coupling happened, not just amongst black and whites, but sir, Asian, white, Mexican, Alaskan, it's all a thing!
It's like a huge convergence.
Sir, I assume that in the year 2056, we will have people that don't look like what the average American look like, because there's not an average American, we're all different. We will have people who look like one homogeneous person, sir. They won't differentiate from each other. So
Is this a mating ritual we're witnessing?
Sir, the people will mix and they will
Work it, honey.
work it. And the future of this here world is a future without racism, sir, because there will be no differences.
Diane, let's get working on that future.
If you're black, take time to relax. All right. We love that we get to do improv, but we need y'all to take an oath. Can you do that with me?
Let's do it.
I swear that today.
I swear that today
was special to me.
was special to me.
What those black improvisers performed will never be performed in my house.
Black improvisers performed will never be performed in my house.
Unless I'm lucky.
Unless you're lucky.
Wait a minute, we gotta wait. We'll do black people first, and then we got time.
I pledge that if I tell my coworkers about this event, I will promise them it was not as uncomfortable as it sounds. And I would tell them they should go check out Blackout in the Twin Cities.
I pledge that in the places of my life, I will make sure that people feel like their environments are safe.
I will make sure that people feel like their environments are safe.
Whether they look like me, think like me, or don't.
I pledge not to use the word mulatto.
Not to use the word
mulatto.
Or the word mulatta. Referring to my mixed family members or friends.
Referring to my mixed family members or friends.
I pledge
to
strengthen relationships.
strengthen relationships
to my communities.
To reach out to my communities.
In order to tear down the patriarchy.
In order to tear down the patriarchy.
Defeat racism.
Defeat racism.
And make a better world for us all.
And make a better world for us all.
Yeah. Thank you. Who would like to call the last? Oh, yeah. All right. Ready? Marty, give me a kiss. Mary Poppins, pull it back at the cast. We want Mary Poppins.
I love Julie Andrews and Mary Poppins. I'm happy to talk about it, but we can also add another one.
We'll add another one. It's nice. Yeah, get a little slip diversity.
Say it loud. Say it loud.
There we go.
Mary Poppins and white privilege. Really like a...
Mary Poppins and white privilege.
Good luck. White privilege, Mary Poppins.
They're not related at all.
Well, if a black woman had come down on an umbrella and landed in front of your house,
she would not.
Right, took your kids with a black Dick Van Dyke, went down the chimneys of all of England.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have gone.
I don't know if that would have been a movie. I want to just say about Mary Poppins. Will I make it? Sure. I just want to say about Mary Poppins that I used to think you could fly with umbrellas.
You can.
What?
They just have to be big enough.
I want to add. Go ahead.
So I think Mary Poppins can actually be a little bit of an analogy for white privilege because if your skin has a spoonful of sugar in it, it does help the medicine go down. It just makes some things a little bit easier.
Yeah. For those who've not seen Mary Poppins, probably my friend who pulled it, but it's a film about a white lady who moves to a white town and does magical stuff. They smash the patriarchy, I think, and then she flies away.
She kind of does because she doesn't marry the leading man at the end.
Yeah, she's not.
That always happens. She didn't do that.
Yeah, and I think the mother of the child was a suffragette, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me to my next point. Anthony. Some of y'all like Susie Anthony. Some of y'all don't know that she wanted things first for white women.
Yeah.
And then the other colors or races could get their equality or be able to vote. The vote for white women first. Let the others wait.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's what she said.
Yeah, well, and I think that's like that's a common theme when you look at like so many liberation movements is that they're so many of them are so focused inward, right? And they say we need to solve our problems first, and then we can deal with those, right? And it like the same thing happened with like the revolution, like American Revolution, right? It was like first we need to get liberated from England, and then we can figure out what's happening with slavery, right? And then it's the like with the women's right to vote, right? Like I think. And I think we're at a time now where we have to like challenge ourselves to hold multiple ideas all at the same time.
Yep. Don't just fix one.
Because the thing is that all of our faiths are intertwined, right? And they're all there. You can pull one string and like release that string, but it's like we're all still just attached to this pole, right? And it's like everyone, and it's like, oh, but we need to do this first and this first. And like really, like we have to do it all. I mean, like, and that's the hardest thing is that we're working. There's so much that we're working against. There's so much money that we're working against, right? Like there's so many people who stand to gain from imbalance of power and imbalance of privilege. And we have so much to work against, but we just have to do it. We have to both fight for women's rights and people of color's rights and queer people's rights, and we just have to do it all at the same time.
And guess what? We're gonna fuck up. Like, let's just acknowledge that. It's not gonna be a perfect fix. There's no way that we could just all of a sudden wake up tomorrow and decide that we're gonna take on this work and not hurt somebody emotionally, physically. Like, our actions are going to have consequences, and we all don't have the answers. But try. You must try. Say you're sorry if you make a mistake, and move forward.
And I think in order for everyone to be working towards that same goal, because there's many struggles, but there's one goal, and the goal is equity, and whatever it may be, right? I think for people to work together, you have to recognize your privilege. Like, whether it's white, so I love this quote, I forget who I heard it from, but like, we all have a blind spot in the shape of our privilege. Right now, we are all able-bodied, you know? Whether it be you're straight, you don't identify as an LGBTQ, or you're white, you know what I mean?
Or sexy.
Okay. But like, we all have a blind spot in the shape of our privilege. Some people's, blind spot is bigger than others, but we all have that little bit of privilege. And I think people need to recognize what that privilege is and how their privilege can keep them from, connecting to someone, or it can keep them from, what's the word when you relate into?
Relate.
Like empathize?
Empathize is the word. Yeah, I think you have privilege. Like, you can't just say I don't have privilege. You have privilege,
You can clap if you agree.
I think there's one, and I just want to say quickly too, I think like, an analogy that helps me explain it to people in terms of like, they're scared to talk about these things and scared to acknowledge things, is that if you think about conversations around privilege and race and inequality, is like cooking, right? You can't walk into the kitchen and on your first day beat Bobby Flay, right? Like, it takes time, right? You're gonna burn some food, you're gonna ruin some steaks, you might burn your hand a bit, you might cut a finger, but guess what? The more that you do it, the better you'll get. Yeah. And like, that's so like difficult conversations, it's like cooking. You can't walk into a kitchen as a person who's never seen a kitchen before and expect to whip up, something incredible, like beef Wellington or whatever. I don't know.
I think one of the things that comes up a lot of times in discussions of race is that question of, well, when is it enough time? Slavery ended, at this time. The civil rights movement was 50 years ago. Haven't you had enough time to figure it out, black people? And like, one, it hasn't been very much time. I'll note that first. But two, know that like there's not an end. Like we're not gonna end at a utopia for any of these problems, whether it be, but the goal is to be better every day. If we can just be a little bit better and treat each other a little bit better every day, the world 100 years from now will look so much better than it does now. And I think it's a continual goal. It's something that we always need to be working forward. We need to always be looking at our prejudices and our biases and just make sure that we treat a world where everyone has the ability to succeed and bring their full selves all the time.
Yeah, Dr. Hastings Mayor!
Privilege is something that comes up a lot, and I've had conversations with my step relatives, the children of the mulatto lady, who got very, I'm glad you all know what I'm talking about, it's wonderful, got very defensive at the idea of privilege. And I kind of want to dive into it because it's a word that's thrown around a lot, and a lot of people don't understand what that even means, or they think that it means that, well, I've struggled, like I grew up in poverty and I'm white, like how am I like privileged versus someone who's also in poverty? Like, it's kind of a defending something that it's not exactly what it is. And I just kind of want us to dive deeper into that, like what is privilege?
Privilege is being able to grab an umbrella as a white lady and fly around England looking for work.
No background check.
No background check. Nobody asks you questions. The idea that Hastings has this event, you have to have some privilege to want to request it. This is not out of, this is out of some sort of struggle, some hurt, some pain, and that was a result of privilege. Then on a basic level, the ability to dream as a child, to dream bigger than what you just know. I thought growing up in Riverside and having my own apartment with one bedroom was the dream. And then I had a white girlfriend, her parents were affluent, they showed me what mortgage is like and like having a home by the lake. And I was like, oh, there's more to this. That's privilege. To just have a reality that you can believe you can attain. And women being able to walk at night safely, I don't know if we'll ever have that in our lifetime, but as a male, I recognize, as a black male, I can walk around the streets whenever I want, unless there's a cop. I'll go in the house. Right? Privilege never stops, but I recognize I can walk around the streets and feel safe from, you know, any sort of sexual abuse or just being harassed. Nobody wants this. But that's another form of privilege. Like, privilege just can sometimes be synonymous with racist, or like somebody who's not compassionate. It's beyond compassion and racism. It's like, who are you? Announce yourself if you are a white person. You then announce that you are white in a room, because the black people don't even have to announce it. You don't get that option to just be vacant in these kind of discussions, right? Like, that's a privilege to walk into a room and, you know, forget that you can say that you were a white male or a white female.
And I think that when we talk about white privilege, it isn't to say that all white people were born with some kind of magical silver spoon in their mouth, that they never faced adversity or had hardships or, you know, faced foreclosure or mortgages or have tragedy in their past.
Right.
It just means that like there's a weight that's hung off of all of us for being people of color that you don't have for not having that, you know, for not being a person of color. It's just an advantage that you have. You know, like there are all types of things, you know, like you talked about women being able to run safely at night.
Yeah.
Like that's an extra weight that they have to carry that we don't have to carry. It doesn't mean that we don't have hardships too,
right.
But we're recognizing the fact that because of the fact that we're men, we have a certain advantage. We have a certain privilege.
Well, and it's something that we just don't have to think about, right? And like that's really and so much of privilege is really just that. It's something that we don't even have to account for.
Exactly.
Right? And like so there's you know that moment of like, oh, I never thought about that. Like that's it, right? Like that is the kernel of privilege, right? And I think like people talk about privilege a lot in terms of thinking about it monetarily and all that, but I think at its core is like not having the mental weight of having to worry about certain things, right? And like that's it. And there are other things that are there, but I think like it is easiest to understand in that terms, right? If you feel like the racial strife in this nation is new, it's because of privilege, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and it, you know, and like it's sort of like the sort of like recurring theme of like these recent years is that it's not the struggle isn't new, right? The violence isn't new. The cameras are. Right, we all have cameras now, so we can disseminate our experience as it's happening. We don't, because before what would happen is that you look at every black comedian in the 90s, the first thing they say is, how about them police, right? Like everyone.
We've been saying it.
It's not a new thing, right? But now you can see it as it's happening. It's like, oh yeah, and that moment of like never thought about it. Like that's it. That's the
I love when white people tell other white people about their privilege, because I'm realizing now there's a limit to what I can do. Like after Rodney King, it's fucked up.
Sorry, no, keep going.
Like I'm just realizing, like moving forward, like we recognize it, yes, but like a lot of times people leave these things and they go, what can I do? I drive a Volvo and everybody like, hey. You can tell other white people that you recognize your privilege, and that can be a start, or at least do it in front of me. So I gotta have my popcorn and tea and be like, yeah, this is good. Right? We good?
Yeah.
We good? You good? We good?
You're good.
No, I'm good. Oh, quiet down, sweetie, quiet down.
Oh no. I broke my Xbox. Why won't you help me? We're at a GameStop.
All right, Floyd, did you break another Xbox?
I did.
All right, Floyd, look.
Look.
I'm looking.
No, I wish I could help you, but we gotta let you go.
Oh,
We gotta let you go.
it's my first day.
I know.
I just started my shift.
You've been having a rough couple hours, Floyd.
What? Come on. I got here like 2 hours early.
Yes, and you've broken 15 Xboxes. We gotta let you go, man. Look, but don't worry. You're gonna get out there. You're gonna find a new job. Look, you got plenty of skills. You know, you got a nice face.
That's a very weird thing to say to me.
Now that you don't work for me anymore, I can say that I find you quite handsome.
What?
But anyways,
this is a very, I gotta say, I've never been fired like this.
All right, Susan, I want you to help me look over these applications.
Okay.
We have a few new candidates. This one is David Johnson. I think that's
I'm gonna set David Johnson over here. What's the next one?
All right, this next one is Floyd. How do you pronounce that?
Gebratatios.
Oh, Floyd Gebratatios. I'm gonna set him in this pile.
Yeah, I don't want to have to learn how to pronounce that name. Let's hire the other guy.
That I want to hire Floyd Gebratatios.
You want to hire him?
Hey, my name's John Gebratatios. I'm Floyd's brother.
Hi, John.
How do you pronounce our last name?
It's what? I'm sorry. Like, can we just call you John G or something?
No, his name is Floyd. Co-worker who hired my brother.
It was me. I hired Floyd.
Times are changing.
Listen, Samuel. I just think we have a serious problem here at Best Buy. And that problem is we're really white. There's a lot of white people here. I'm the only black person working in corporate, and I don't like it.
I'm recording it with my demo phone.
Never get my reference.
I mean, but you're here, so we do have a black person here and a woman. Even a woman.
No, he hit it in the name of diversity.
We don't have a diversity problem here at Best Buy. Right?
Samuel or Tom.
We even hired that little person.
Can you let me speak, please? Thank you. Hush, I don't really need a hype person. I can hype myself up, okay? Samuel, you have a problem here at Best Buy, and I'm not going to be the only one to fix it, because it's not my problem to fix, it's yours.
It doesn't seem to me like we have a problem.
He has got privilege.
Maybe if I show you this mirror that I picked up from a voodoo queen, you'll be able to see.
Damn, that looks just like you.
That you don't see on a regular basis. What it is that you could only dream of knowing, Samuel.
Oh man,
this is me as a black man.
With poor eyesight.
Yet another privilege that you have.
He couldn't afford the LASIKs that I bought.
Whoa! And Samuel, if you look even deeper, you'll see that you're not just repeated as a black person, you're repeated as a woman!
What is happening? Would it be inappropriate for me? No, Bad me.
Like that.
No.
Okay.
No.
What I'm trying to show you is there's parts of yourself that make it so hard to work around because you don't recognize the privilege you have.
Finger
Samuel.
snacks. Finger snacks.
Wow.
My bad.
So when you look into the mirror of the Voodoo, Mississippi, you will find that when you walk in someone else's shoes, it's a little bit harder because she's wearing 6-inch heels.
Boom! She's wearing 6-inch heels.
And I don't think you can do that as gracefully as your female doppelganger.
You know what I think?
Doesn't matter.
I think if we sell this mirror, we can make a killing.
Yeah, we're Blackout.
Will you please tell us who you are?
Oh, my name is John Gebratatios. I'm Theo Langeson.
Alyssa DiVirgilio.
Ashanti Sakina Ford.
And I am Duck, just like the bird, Washington.
So thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here. Good luck with fixing racism, Hastings. You can find us on online and social media. But yes,
I was just gonna say that we perform at Mixed Blood Theater in Minneapolis the third Monday of every month at 8 o'clock. And you know, it's a little bit of a drive from Hastings, but if you want to spend 45 minutes in the car, you can come see our full show.
They'll be fine in
But
a car.
it's past rush hour. It's going to be 30 minutes easy.
30 minutes fine. Hop on a 62 and keep going. By the way, congratulations on Gumby.
I just want to say, like, I'm not from Hastings. I don't know nothing about here. I don't know what, like, the diversity population is. But if you're thinking of ways that you want to, you know, do some restorative practices or get to learn about other cultures, theater and seeing improv is seeing us doing improv is a great way, or seeing theater about different experiences. You know, if you don't have a friend, you can go and be like, hey girl, what's your life like? Go see some theater. Doc is in A Raisin in the Sun at Park Square Theater. I am in a show called A Crack in the Sky that closes next weekend. It's about a Somali-American immigrant and his journey moving from Somalia to America. So I don't know. At the History Theater. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Theater is a great way to just immerse yourself in things.
Yeah.
Stay close in the audience.
Let's give it up for Blackout.